A sudden call from my sister, Kristen. After stealing my husband, what could she possibly want? When I answered, I heard the crying of a child and Kristen's triumphant voice over the phone. I took your child from the apartment and brought her home. Ben and I will raise her properly in your place. Additionally, my husband, who left me and my daughter for his mistress. My sister laughed and joked, the daughter also wants a young and beautiful mom like me. My sister has always harassed me since we were children. But now she is trying to take not only my husband but also my daughter from me. However, before anger, a question arose in my mind. What is going on here? The words my sister spoke and the current situation did not connect at all. And I asked her in confusion. Whose child is this? It's a bit hard to say. After my words, my sister and husband, who had been taking my daughter with ease, seemed shocked. They must be pale over the phone. The two of them have done something irreversible. The worst development awaits them. I am Megan. We are a family of 4 with my parents and my sister. Our parents are kind and gentle, and they raised us sisters without any hardship. Like my parents, I am often told by others that I have a generous personality. However, Kristen, my sister who is 2 years younger, was different from us with a strong and aggressive character. And since she became aware, she seemed to have a strong hostility towards me, constantly harassing me. My oldest memory is from when we were in kindergarten. And each of us sisters received a stuffed animal as a Christmas present. I received a pink rabbit stuffed animal and my sister a blue cat stuffed animal. We were both thrilled to receive exactly what we asked Santa for. And we were always together, whether sleeping or going out. One morning, when I woke up, the stuffed animal that should have been next to me was gone. I searched around the bed but couldn't find it. In a panic, I asked my sister, who had woken up earlier, if she knew where the stuffed animal was. But she said she didn't know. As I was worried about the stuffed animal, my mother told me I was going to be late. So I started getting ready for kindergarten. When my sister called me saying she had found the stuffed animal. Rushing to where my sister was, she pointed inside the trash can. The trash can. I wondered but reluctantly looked inside. And there was my stuffed animal. Shredded and with cotton spilling out as if it had been cut with scissors. Seeing that, I burst into tears. I vaguely remember our parents rushing over to comfort me after hearing the commotion. But I was too shocked by what happened to the stuffed animal to remember clearly. My sister was still young at the time, so my parents consoled me by saying it wasn't on purpose. But I still vividly remember my sister laughing loudly while I was crying. Her smile is etched in my memory, not the innocent one of a child, but rather like that of a devil. At that time, I didn't even have the capacity to think about why she was laughing. But as her harassment became a daily occurrence, I realized that her laughter was from the joy of setting me up. The harassment from my sister continued daily after that incident. She would steal my snacks, push me into a field on the way to school, or tear my study notes. Every time she harassed me, I would get angry and confront her. But since Kristen was stronger-willed and more articulate, she would feign ignorance or angrily yell back at me, leaving me always feeling defeated. Our parents would scold her each time, but Kristen would appear remorseful only in front of them, never genuinely repenting or stopping the harassment. As we grew older, her methods of harassment escalated. Thanks to the care of my parents and friends, nothing serious happened. But she went as far as to post slander about me anonymously online, steal money from my piggy bank, or suddenly push me onto the road. All of which could have led to crimes or accidents. Having been harassed by my sister from a young age, I could never figure out why she hated me so much. In middle school, after a friend gave me a bracelet for my birthday, which I cherished. She broke it. Crying, I asked her, "Why do you harass me?" After thinking for a moment, Kristen just spat out, "I just hate your existence. There's nothing I can do about that." I was speechless at my sister's response. While she was turbulent only in relation to me, she managed her other interpersonal relationships and school life reasonably well. Our parents, wondering if there was something wrong with how they raised us, patiently dealt with my sister, who only ever seemed remorseful in the moment. They tried various approaches to connect with her, but she remained unchanged. When we reached the 3rd year of middle school and it was time to choose our paths, my patience had reached its limit. Despite our parents and me getting angry or lecturing her, Kristen never stopped her harassment. Realizing it was impossible to understand each other, I chose to attend a high school far enough from home that I couldn't commute, opting for dormitory life. It was hard to leave my parents whom I loved, but it was the only way to escape from my sister. My parents felt guilty for not being able to resolve the situation with Kristen, but they supported my decision, understanding that it would ease my mind. I spent 3 years in high school dormitory life and then chose to live alone during my university years without returning to my parents' home, where my sister was. During my time away, I kept in regular contact with my parents, but I stayed completely estranged from Kristen, not even exchanging messages. After I started working, my parents told me Kristen had successfully found a job but later left home saying, "I'm going to live with my boyfriend." She occasionally returned home, but rarely responded to our parents' messages. And they didn't even know where she was living, keeping her whereabouts unknown. While my parents sighed over my sister's whimsical behavior, I was somewhat relieved to hear she had moved out, allowing me to visit home without having to be cautious. As time passed, I married Ben, my boyfriend from university. My parents were delighted about our marriage. Since Kristen was still out of touch, we couldn't have a face-to-face meeting. Though our relationship was poor, she was still my sister, and I felt a bit sad not being able to share the news of my marriage with her. I hoped that with time and as we both matured, Kristen's attitude towards me would calm down. I hoped that when we met next, we could have a normal sisterly relationship. In my heart, I wished for this. And 3 years after getting married, I was living a fulfilling life with my beloved husband and our adorable child. I quit my job after giving birth and was busy with housework and child rearing. It was a busy life, but I was happy. However, not long after our child was born, my husband began coming home late more frequently. He also started working on weekends, saying he had business trips. Before, my husband hardly ever worked overtime, and he had never gone on business trips. Despite feeling a bit suspicious, I believed him when he said, "I've been transferred to a different department, and continue to handle parenting on my own." One night, after returning from a business trip, my husband, who had already eaten outside, went straight to the bedroom saying he was tired after a bath. While sighing at the suit he left on the living room sofa, I picked it up to hang it and noticed something hard in the pocket. "What's this?" Curious, I took it out, and it turned out to be a lipstick. I was so shocked I froze. It was a brand I had never used, certainly not mine. Why was there lipstick in my husband's suit pocket when he was supposed to be on a business trip? I was shaken, and my hands trembled as I held the lipstick. His recently sudden late returns, frequent business trips on weekends. I was convinced my husband was having an affair. Why? With whom? I felt an urge to confront my husband immediately, but he was already asleep, and I was too upset to speak properly. Moreover, it seemed better to gather evidence and discuss this calmly. Thinking this, I took a photo of the lipstick as evidence, and searched online for a detective agency to gather proof of my husband's affair. I pretended everything was normal while waiting, and about a week later, I received the investigation report from the agency. During the day when my husband was at work, I nervously checked the contents and was shocked. The name written as my husband's affair partner was my sister, Kristen. Where did they meet? Why did she know he was married? Many questions popped into my head. But what dominated my thoughts were all the times Kristen had harassed me in the past. Could it be? But if anyone would do it, it would be Kristen. Surely, this was also part of her harassment against me. The investigation report also included a background check on Kristen. And her mobile number was listed, so I impulsively called it. When Kristen answered, I shouted, "What on earth are you thinking?" She seemed to realize it was me right away and giggled on the other end. "Oh, did you find the lipstick?" That lipstick was deliberately placed by Kristen to make me aware of the affair. I was sure of it from her tone. I confronted Kristen, trying to contain my anger. Laughing, she proudly began to spill the details as if boasting. Kristen learned about my marriage when she visited our parents' home after a long time. It seems she saw my wedding photo, which our parents cherished. Then, as a way to harass me, she came up with the idea of stealing my husband. Kristen searched for my husband's social media using his name, sent him messages, and made contact. Identifying herself as my sister, she lied to my husband, saying, "I've been terribly treated by my family. And I wasn't even told about my sister's marriage." Painting me and our parents as terrible people and deceiving my husband. She kept him from telling me, claiming these were confidential consultations. And frequently contacted him, manipulating him to develop romantic feelings for her. My husband believed everything Kristen said, betraying me and our daughter according to Kristen's plan, and entered into a relationship with her. Harassment. This goes beyond mere harassment. I felt a mix of anger and disgust at my sister's story. I have plans later, so I'm going to hang up now. Ben is head over heels for me, so it looks like you'll be getting a divorce, sis. Good luck. After revealing everything, Kristen hung up laughing without waiting for my reply. After the call with Kristen, I just sat down on the spot. I had been harassed by Kristen countless times growing up. But I thought if she had grown up and reflected on her actions, I could let bygones be bygones. I had hoped we could become normal sisters. Yet, Kristen was still only thinking of putting me down. And in such a cowardly way. Tears overflowed, but just then, my daughter, who had been napping in the next room, seemed to wake up. Right, I can't just sit here hurt. For my daughter's sake, I needed to talk to my husband. I hugged my daughter, gathering my strength. That night, after putting my daughter to bed, I confronted my husband with the investigation report as evidence of his affair. However, even after seeing it, my husband showed no remorse and didn't even apologize. Even as I asserted everything Kristen said was nonsense, my husband didn't believe me at all. Fully trusting Kristen's side of the story. Truly, love is blind. Then my husband said he wanted to be with Kristen and asked for a divorce. Though it was Kristen who initiated it. I couldn't continue with someone who so easily betrayed me and our daughter. So I agreed to the divorce but insisted I wouldn't give up custody of our daughter. However, my husband also wanted to keep custody, and our opinions clashed head-on. I couldn't give in on that point, so the divorce discussion remained unresolved. We talked until dawn, but it looked like it was going to be a long battle. So we paused the discussion, and my husband, saying he'd live with Kristen, left the house without even looking at our sleeping daughter. Why would a father who hadn't been involved with his daughter suddenly want custody? If he had paternal feelings, he shouldn't have cheated. Various thoughts crossed my mind, but no matter how I argued, he stubbornly insisted on not giving up custody. I continued to negotiate with my husband via phone and email. But the conversation remained at a deadlock, and we hadn't even managed to divorce yet. After my husband left, I started looking for a job to prepare for divorce, while my parents took care of my 1-year-old daughter. I explained everything to my parents about Kristen's harassment and the affair with my husband, which led to the divorce. My parents were as shocked as I was, never imagining Kristen would go this far. And they apologized to me on behalf of Kristen, crying. However, I knew it wasn't my parents' fault from how they had always dealt with Kristen. I asked my parents to take care of my daughter while I looked for a job during the divorce. My parents gladly accepted to help with anything they could. One night, as I was putting my daughter to bed, I received a call on my phone. Who could it be at this hour? When I checked the screen, it was from my sister, Kristen. I hadn't spoken to her since I confronted her about the affair. Curious, I answered the phone, and I could hear the sound of a child crying on the other end. A child? According to my parents, Kristen was supposed to be unmarried. And I heard she didn't have any children. Confused by this, I then heard Kristen's triumphant voice along with the child's cries. I've taken your child from the apartment. You're fussing over custody, right? Ben and I will raise her properly in your place. I also heard what must be my husband next to her, jokingly agreeing. Our daughter also says she wants a young and beautiful mom like me. While hearing their mocking laughter, I was confused. What are Kristen and my husband talking about? Many questions arose. Whose crying is that, anyway? Because my daughter is right here, sleeping next to me. I tried to calm my confused mind and asked Kristen calmly. Whose child is that? It's a bit hard to say. But my daughter is here with me right now, you know? Huh? Kristen sounded baffled over the phone. What? But I took this child from your house. Upon further discussion, it turned out Kristen had broken into the apartment where my husband and I used to live and took a child she found sleeping there. Hearing this made my blood run cold. That's because after my husband left, I moved out of the apartment immediately after explaining the situation to my parents and relocated near their home. Since the apartment was leased in my name, I could move out without my husband's consent. Therefore, someone else should be living in our old apartment now. I was planning to inform my husband if he contacted me, so he didn't know about the move yet. When I explained the situation, they realized their mistake. And I could hear them freaking out over the phone. In a panic, they started blaming each other, creating a chaotic scene. I sternly told them, this is not the time for that, and said they should quickly take the child to the police. By now, the child's parents must have realized their child was missing and be in distress. However, upon hearing the word police, Kristen panicked and hung up the phone unilaterally. This is serious. Thinking this, I immediately called my parents to explain the situation. My parents were shocked by what Kristen had done and said we should go to the police immediately. I left my daughter with my parents and went to the police to explain in detail. When I arrived at the police station and was explaining what I heard from my sister, Kristen and my husband showed up at the police crying, with the child in tow. Seeing me, my husband approached me angrily, yelling, "This is all your fault for moving out without telling. But this is a police station." Before he could reach me, he was restrained by the police officers around. Subsequently, Kristen and my husband were taken in for questioning immediately. According to the police, a couple who moved into the apartment after I left were also raising a girl about 1 year old. And there was no doubt that she was the child Kristen had taken. The child's parents had noticed she was missing just before I arrived at the police station, had called the police, and were searching the area. As a parent myself, the mere thought of a child being abducted is heart-wrenching. Despite Kristen's rampage, I felt truly sorry for the involved family. My husband had been returning home late or going to Kristen under the guise of business trips on weekends for months before the affair came out. So he hadn't been paying much attention to our daughter. That's why he hadn't doubted that the child Kristen brought was our daughter. To think he couldn't even recognize his own child and yet claimed he wanted custody. I was utterly dismayed. The couple who were the victims of the abduction were fortunately reunited with their child. But they were not willing to forgive Kristen and my husband. And it seemed they would remain in police custody. Afterwards, through a lawyer, I demanded a divorce and compensation from my detained husband. Weakened mentally by his arrest and subsequent firing from his job, my husband quickly agreed to both requests. My lawyer told me that upon hearing about the restraining order against approaching our daughter due to the kidnapping incident, my husband broke down crying, possibly out of regret. However, hearing about my husband's state did not sway my heart. Even if it started with my sister's lies, my husband ultimately betrayed me and my daughter. Though it was an unsuccessful attempt due to mistaken identity, he had colluded with my sister in trying to take away my daughter. I had lost all affection for him long ago. Moreover, his infatuation with my sister was so deep that he couldn't even recognize his own daughter's face, clearly showing he was unfit to be a parent. As for my sister, facing a lawsuit from the victimized couple, she asked our parents during a visit to hire a lawyer for her. But they refused and disowned her instead. Kristen was stunned by our parents' words. Throughout our lives, no matter how terribly Kristen treated me or harassed me, our parents never blamed her unilaterally. They always engaged with her properly, listening to her side and responding carefully. They always felt that perhaps some of the reasons for Kristen's troubled behavior could be their fault. And they raised both of us equally, never abandoning either of us despite the problems Kristen caused. However, even their deep love reached its limit when Kristen, now an adult, continued to obsess over me and ultimately involved not only me but also my daughter, her husband, and an unrelated child in such an incident. It seems they had finally run out of patience with her. Faced with our parents, who spoke to her as if they were talking to a stranger in an unemotional manner, Kristen was unsettled and hurriedly apologized for the trouble she caused. But it was too late. After that meeting, our parents decided it would be the last. And no matter how much Kristen requested to see them, they never met her again. The incident they caused was an unheard of case of kidnapping due to mistaken identity. And their photos and real names were prominently featured in the local newspaper. They might receive a suspended sentence since they turned themselves in. But their names have been tarnished, and living in this area will likely be difficult. By the time my divorce from my former husband was finalized, I had successfully found a job, and now I live happily every day with my adorable daughter. Living close to my parents' house, they provide full support with childcare, making life much easier than when I was married to my ex-husband. Though my daughter no longer has a father nearby, a husband who couldn't even recognize his daughter's face is unnecessary. Instead, not just me but also my parents, the three of us together, want to closely watch over my daughter's growth.